Shalom everyone, it's Friday again, and this time we're with Parashat Noach. Parashat Noach, the second parasha of the Torah, deals with probably, I would say, one of the most famous biblical stories that there is. This biblical story is painted on children's bedrooms, can be found in nearly every single toy store, is in nearly every single children's book of the Bible. You will find a picture of Noah's Ark with the giraffe sticking out the top, and most likely you will find a dove with an olive branch flying around somewhere in the background. And that is what I would like to focus on today. The story is quite simple. Humanity went off the edge, and God says we need to do a restart. And classic sense, have you ever tried turning it on and off again? Well, God does that. And he says, but I am going to take a USB full of humans and animals and keep that to restart the program later. And that is Noach. And the animals, his family, are put on this ark. And despite the flood that comes and washes the rest of the world clean, to a certain degree, Noah and his family survive. And they are the restart of humanity and the animal kingdom and so on and so forth. Very much a metaphor for the rebirth, the recreation of Adam, the recreation of all of the animals, the sixth day of creation. Everything is turned in many ways going back to the second day of creation, of separating the waters, the heavenly waters and the lower waters. Purpose we see actually to Hom Rabbah and Arubot HaShamayim, everything is kind of upended. We go back to day 2, and okay, fine, great, we can create the world once more. But there is a symbol that has come out of this story, which you would actually expect to be a different symbol, but we'll expand on that in a second. When God takes Noah out of the ark, he says to him, Hineni noten lecha et briti shalom, right? Indeed, there is or maybe that's from Pinchas, but there's a similar kind of statement here in which God says to God, God says to Noach, V'haita keshet ba'anan. God, when Noah brings a sacrifice after celebrating coming out, God shows a big rainbow in the sky, and this rainbow, V'haita keshet ba'anan v'reitia lizkor brit olam ben Elohim uven kol nefesh chaya, to remember this between God and all of the animals and the humans, that indeed God will not lo yikaret kol basar od mimei hamabul. There will never be another flood. Peace in our times in many ways. And yet, the symbol of peace that comes out of our parasha is the dove with the olive branch. Now, I want to actually delve deeper into that story and see what's going on there. If we look in the middle of our parasha, once Noah is floating around with the ark, and the rain stops, everything starts to calm down a bit, and he's trying to figure out when is it safe to come out, because even though some of the waters might have drained away, there still might be very swampy areas. It might not be habitable and stuff like that. And so we see והמים היו הלוך וחסור עד החודש העשירי, and the waters were going back and fro until the 10th month. בעשירי באחד לחודש, on the first day of the 10th month, נראו ראשי ההרים, and the tops of the hills recited, land ho, indeed, we are returning back to earth. ויהי מקץ 40 יום, and after 40 days, ויפתח נוח את חלון התיבה אשר עשה, and there was a window, and Noah opens the window of the ark, וישלח את העורב, and he sends forth the crow, or the raven. ויצא יצוב ושוב עד יבושת המים מעל הארץ, and this raven flies back and forth, and to a certain degree is trying to search for land, and it does not find it. And so, וישלח את היונה מאיתו. And so, Noah sends out the dove. Don't forget, he's only got a few of each. וישלח את יונה מאיתו לראות הקלו המים מעל פני האדמה. The raven failed. We need to send, in many ways, attempt number 2, which is the dove. ולא מצא היונה מנוח. לקף רגלה, ותשוב אליו אל התיבה. And the Yonah did not find anywhere to rest, and so it had to return. Think about it. It's flying over the sea, in essence, and so it needed to land somewhere. It landed back with Noach. כי מים על פני כל הארץ. Because it's still very much a flood. Vayishlach yado vayikachea vayaveh ota elav el hateva, and so Noah reaches out his arm and brings the Yonah into the ark. By the way, Professor Yoni Grossman in his book Genesis Parashat has a beautiful analysis of the relationship between the Yonah and Noach, and that he brings it in and he sends it out, and all the different beautiful nuances in the text. I refer you all to there. Vayachel od shivat yamim acherim, and 7 days later, Vayosef shalach et hayonah min hateva, and Noah decides to try again, and he sends the dove forth from the ark. We've given it 7 days. Hopefully everything might have calmed down a bit. Vatavo elav hayonah la'et erev. You can just imagine the scene. Noach is waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and the dove is nowhere to be seen. And then, as the sun is going down over the sea that surrounds him, you think Noah's going to give up in the dark. There's no way of anything happening then. And then, suddenly, vatavo elav hayonah, he sees this fluttering dove, maybe white, flying towards him as the sun goes down, with the sun glinting off its feathers. Vehine ale zait taraf befia. And there is a branch, a fresh olive branch. It's not something that was found floating around from the previous edition of Earth, but rather this has been snapped off. So in other words, there's land, so there's fresh olive trees growing somewhere. Vayeda Noach, and Noach knew, ki kalu hamayim me'al haaretz. And now he knew that finally the flood was over, in essence. But, fascinatingly, vayachel od shivat yamim acherim. He waits 7 more days. Vayeshalach et hayonah, and he sends the Yonah forth once more. V'lo yasfa shuv elav od, and the Yonah did not come back. Why? Because, as we say from the song on Shabbat, Yonah matzah bo manoach. On the 7th day, the Yonah found a place to dwell, to stop, to rest, and the Yonah doesn't need to come back to the ark because it found a new home and it set up a new, perched on a branch and found food, and so on and so forth. And indeed, from that we see, on that day, Noah came out of the ark, big celebration, we're done, we're finished, thank God, we can move on with life. The Yonah, the dove, was sent out 3 times. First time, nothing. Second time, olive branch, but came back. And third time, didn't come back. Only after the third time is it truly over. Why are we celebrating the second time? If we're looking for a symbol of peace, of a covenant, of, this is it, we've found peace, this is the end of war, the end of conflict, the end of strife, the end of the flood. Why are we going with the olive branch? The olive branch represents, if anything, a ceasefire, not the end of the war. And this takes me directly into the realm of the Midrash. The Midrash beautifully notices that of all the different plants and branches that the dove could have brought back, it brought back an olive branch. What's the significance of the olive branch? And so the Midrash there are 2 different Midrashim that give very beautiful different answers. One of them has a much more positive outlook and says the olive branch, the olives make oil. And oil, especially in the ancient world, was used for light. So when the branch comes back, when the dove comes back with an olive branch, there's a symbol of, this is the germination of the light. Now that we had darkness and storms and dark clouds, this is the light, man-made light. Humanity is able to start afresh with man-made oil and lamps and light, a flicker in the darkness. The light at the end of the tunnel is what the olive branch represents. But there's a more classic midrash that is quoted by many of the classic Mefarshim, including Rashi, which actually says, no, the olive branch represents bitterness. Just like olives, especially when they're not dried, but rather fresh, are very bitter, not very edible. So too, the dove is saying to Noach, there's something bitter here in the background. This is, to a certain degree, it's a bittersweet message. Yes, there is hope. Yes, there are some trees that have managed to, grow back again, and yet, at the same time, it's not over yet. It's not edible. This is a branch which needs to be. There's a lot of work needs to be done here. You need to process the olives. You need to pickle them, or if you're talking back about oil, you need to process it. The dove is saying we're at the beginning of the end, but it's not the end itself. And I think beautifully, this very much ties in with the period that we are currently in, I think, in Jewish history, specifically focusing in on the last few years that we've had. There's been this moment, Baruch Hashem, with the release of the hostages, with this ceasefire, where everyone feels a deep sigh of relief. Baruch Hashem, it's over. And yet it's not over. And yet the clouds of war still can be seen on the horizon, and yet, unfortunately, soldiers still are losing their lives in Gaza, and yet there's talk of, Lebanon still bubbling away in the background. There's all sorts of stuff going on. And I felt myself this week that I was very conflicted, very confused, because on one hand, we should be at peace. We should be over, and, we can wrap up the whole thing and close that book and hopefully move on with our lives. On the other hand, the echoes, the rumblings of the storms, of the flood, have not yet silenced. And when reading the parasha, I realized maybe this is exactly the message that can echo to us from the parasha. We have reached the stage of the olive branch. It's not the end. We will have to send the dove of peace out once more. And hopefully then we will send it out for good. Reminds me a bit of the Nazir, of this finality of releasing the birds, and you are free, fly away. But at this stage, the bird comes back. Peace is not final. And I think maybe for all of those who see the dove and the olive branch as a symbol of peace, that is actually a much deeper idea that maybe they are not fully aware of with regard to peace. True peace is not the olive branch. The olive branch is a symbol of the beginning of the end, of there is work yet to be done, and we're not there yet. And it actually might, Noach says, might not be over. 7 more days. We're going to have to stay inside. It might all flare up again. And yet, for a moment, we can celebrate. And that symbol of the dove and the olive branch is itself a powerful symbol that has echoed throughout the ages. Because even if it's not the end, it's the beginning of the end. It's a moment of respite. Yona matzabo manoach, as we say in the song on Shabbat, on the Zmirot, there's this element of hope, the beginning of hope that hopefully, B'ezrat Hashem, despite all of the bitterness of the olive, despite all of the raw, unprocessed beginning stages that we are through, or that we are beginning and experiencing, hopefully the light is already shining at the end of the tunnel, and we will be able to take this and grow and develop. And I wish only good things, B'ezrat Hashem, may each week bring us closer and closer to drying up the floods, Tufan el-Aqsa, the floods of October 7th are slowly, especially in people's minds and psychologies, we are slowly healing, hopefully slowly, bit by bit. B'ezrat Hashem, the whole Jewish people will be able to celebrate with much more simcha when we send out the dove of peace and it never returns again. Shabbat Shalom.